The first sign that my perfect marriage was a lie came in the form of a real estate sign. I stood frozen in my driveway, staring at the sold banner plastered across it, my grocery bags slipping from numb fingers. Our house, my dream home, had apparently been on the market without my knowledge. My name is Catherine, and until that moment, I thought I knew everything about my husband Isaiah. 15 years of marriage had taught me his habits, his tells, even the way his left eye twitched when he was stressed. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered that afternoon. "There must be some mistake," I muttered, fumbling for my phone. The realtor's number was clearly visible on the sign. 3 rings later, a cheerful voice answered. "Yes, the property at 1542 Maple Grove closed yesterday," she confirmed. "Mr. Lawson handled everything. Such a smooth transaction." My throat went dry. "I'm Mrs. Lawson, his wife." The silence on the other end was deafening. Oh dear," the realtor stammered. "I assumed," he said. "I'm so sorry, I can't discuss this further. You'll need to speak with your husband." I ended the call and walked inside, my mind racing. Isaiah was at work, as usual these days. His laptop sat on the kitchen counter, carelessly left open. We'd always shared passwords. No secrets between us, he'd always said. What a joke that seemed now. My hands shook as I opened his email. The evidence hit me like a physical blow. Correspondence with the realtor, closing documents, wire transfer confirmations. But it was his credit card statements that made my knees buckle. Cartier, Gucci, the Ritz-Carlton, all for someone named Monica. "Hey sis, you're not going to believe this," I said when Giselle answered my call, my voice surprisingly steady. "Remember how Isaiah's been working late for the past few months?" "Catherine, what's wrong?" "He sold our house, without telling me, and apparently he's been buying some woman named Monica everything from diamond bracelets to weekend getaways." "He what?" Giselle's outrage was exactly what I needed. "I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there." But I was already downloading screenshots, forwarding emails to myself, documenting everything. The familiar rhythm of organizing evidence, a skill from my old paralegal days, helped keep the hysteria at bay. A text notification popped up on Isaiah's phone, still synced to his laptop. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. The new place is perfect. My finger hovered over the message. I could confront him now, blow everything wide open. Instead, I took a deep breath and closed the laptop. The front door opened and Giselle rushed in, still in her scrubs from the hospital. "Show me everything," she demanded, pulling me into a fierce hug. I walked her through my discoveries, my voice growing stronger with each revelation. "The house closes in 30 days, I concluded. "He's been transferring money to a separate account for months. Look at these purchases. Someone's been living like a princess on our savings." Giselle's eyes narrowed as she scrolled through the credit card statements. "Wait, I know this Monica. She's that pharmaceutical rep who's always hanging around the hospital. 20-something fake everything, drives a white Mercedes." My stomach lurched. I'd met her at Isaiah's company party last Christmas. She'd complimented my dress while apparently plotting to steal my life. "What are you going to do?" Giselle asked. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. "First, I'm going to call Jarrett King. Remember him? The lawyer who handled Dad's estate? Then I'm going to protect what's left of our assets before Isaiah can drain everything. And then?" A cold smile spread across my face. "Then I'm going to watch karma do its work. Isaiah thinks he's so clever, building his perfect little love nest with Monica. But he's about to learn that karma has a way of collecting debts. Catherine..." Giselle's voice held a warning note. "Don't worry," I assured her, already dialing Jarrett's number. "I'm not going to do anything crazy. I'm just going to make sure that every action has its proper consequence." As I waited for Jarrett to answer, I glanced at the family photo hanging on our living room wall. Isaiah and I beaming at each other on our anniversary last year. What a difference a year makes. The woman in that photo was naive, trusting, vulnerable. But the woman I was becoming, she was someone else entirely. "Jarrett King's office," a familiar voice answered. "Jarrett? It's Catherine." I need your help. How quickly can you file bankruptcy papers? Bankruptcy isn't about giving up, Jarrett explained, spreading documents across his desk. It's about taking control. And in your case, Catherine, it's about protection. 3 days had passed since discovering Isaiah's betrayal, and I'd managed to maintain my poker face at home while setting my plans in motion. Sitting in Jarrett's office, surrounded by the smell of leather and coffee, I felt my first real sense of hope. The timing actually works in our favor, he continued. Isaiah's unauthorized sale of your marital home gives us grounds for an emergency filing. We can freeze most of the remaining assets before he transfers anything else to Monica. He still has no idea I know, I said, twisting my wedding ring. Last night, he actually asked if I wanted to go house hunting this weekend. Can you believe the nerve? Jarrett's expression darkened. Did you agree? Of course, I'm playing the perfect clueless wife until everything's in place. The door opened, and Giselle rushed in, apologizing for being late. She'd insisted on coming to all my legal meetings, claiming 2 heads were better than 1. Really? I think she was worried I'd do something rash. What did I miss? She asked, settling into the chair beside me. We were just discussing strategy, Jarrett replied. Catherine, pull up those credit card statements again. I handed over my phone where I'd documented every transaction. Jarrett scrolled through them, his frown deepening. Look at this pattern, he said. Regular transfers to a joint account every Friday. Monica's probably depending on that money for her lifestyle. When we file the bankruptcy petition, those transfers will stop immediately. Good, I said, perhaps too quickly. Giselle shot me a concerned look. Catherine, revenge isn't... This isn't about revenge, I interrupted. It's about justice. He sold our house, the house we built together, to fund his affair. He's stealing my future to buy her designer bags. Jarrett held up a hand. Focus on protecting yourself first. I've seen too many clients lose everything because they let emotions drive their decisions. My phone buzzed. A text from Isaiah. Working late again. Don't wait up. Sure you are, I muttered, then looked at Jarrett. How quickly can we move? I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. But there's something else you should know. He pulled up a document on his computer. I did some digging. Isaiah's company is struggling. 3 rounds of layoffs this year alone. He's been living way beyond his means, probably trying to impress Monica. Classic midlife crisis, Giselle scoffed. More than that, Jarrett continued. He's been taking out high-interest loans to maintain their lifestyle. When we file, those creditors will come calling. A plan started forming in my mind. So, if someone were to tip off his employer about his financial situation... Catherine, Giselle warned. What? I'm just saying karma works better with a little nudge sometimes. Jarrett leaned forward. Listen carefully. File the bankruptcy. Protect your assets. Let everything else fall where it may. Trust me, people like Isaiah and Monica, they self-destruct on their own. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a notification. Someone had just tried to use our joint credit card at Tiffany & Co. The charge was declined. It's starting already, I said, showing them the notification. I called the credit card company yesterday, reported suspicious activity. They froze the account. Giselle squeezed my hand. How are you holding up, really? I'm angry, I admitted. But mostly I'm tired of feeling like a victim. Every time he lies about working late, every time he comes home smelling like her perfume, I'm done being the fool. Then let's make sure you come out of this stronger, Jarrett said, pulling out more forms. Sign here and here. Tomorrow we file first thing. As I signed the papers, another text came through, this time from an unknown number. Why isn't the card working? Fix it now. M. I showed it to Giselle and Jarrett, a cold smile spreading across my face. Looks like Princess Monica just discovered her credit line is cut off. Don't engage, Jarrett advised. Let them spiral on their own. I nodded, already imagining the chaos unfolding across town. Monica standing at some luxury counter, her card declined. Isaiah scrambling to explain why the money had stopped flowing. One last thing, Jarrett said as we prepared to leave. Change all your passwords, close any accounts you can. And Catherine? He caught my eye. Remember, the best revenge is living well. Walking out of his office, I felt lighter somehow. For the first time since seeing that sold sign, I wasn't just reacting, I was taking control. Let Isaiah and Monica have their fairy tale for now. Reality was about to come crashing down, and I had a front row seat to the show. The bankruptcy papers hit Isaiah like a thunderbolt on a clear day. I was calmly sipping coffee at our kitchen counter when he burst through the front door, waving documents and looking like he'd seen a ghost. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, slapping the papers down. "Bankruptcy? Have you lost your mind?" I took another sip of coffee. "Oh, you got those already? The courier service is getting faster." "Catherine, what are you doing? We're not bankrupt." His face was turning an interesting shade of red. "We just sold the house. We have money." "You mean you sold the house?" I corrected him, "without my knowledge or consent. How's Monica, by the way? Enjoying all those Cartier bracelets?" The colour drained from his face. For a moment he looked like a fish out of water, mouth opening and closing without sound. Then he tried a different approach. "Baby, I can explain." "Save it," I cut him off. "The time for explanations was before you started emptying our accounts to impress your girlfriend." My phone buzzed. Another text from Monica. "Your husband ruined everything. I can't even pay my rent." I showed the message to Isaiah, whose eyes widened in panic. "You have to stop this," he pleaded. "Monica's counting on..." "On what? Your money? Our money?" I stood up, finally letting my anger show. "Well, guess what? The bankruptcy filing freezes everything. Hope she has a backup plan for those designer shopping sprees." The doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Giselle's car in the driveway, right on schedule. "That would be my sister," I said. "She's helping me pack. We need to be out before the new owners take possession, after all." Isaiah grabbed my arm as I walked past. "You're making a huge mistake. I can fix this." "Like you fixed our marriage by sleeping with a woman 10 years younger than me?" I yanked my arm free. "The only mistake was trusting you." Giselle walked in without waiting for an answer, carrying empty boxes. She took one look at the scene and stepped between us. "Back off, Isaiah," she warned. "Unless you want me to call the police." "This is my house," he shouted. "Not anymore," I reminded him. "You sold it, remember? To buy Monica that cute little condo downtown." His phone started ringing. The caller ID showed his company's HR department. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Amazing how quickly credit problems can become employment problems. "You need to answer that," I said sweetly. "Sounds important." He stormed out onto the patio to take the call, leaving Giselle and me to start packing. Through the window, I could see him gesturing frantically, his face growing more desperate by the minute. "You're scary when you're strategic," Giselle commented, carefully wrapping a photo frame. "Remind me never to cross you." "I learned from the best," I replied, picking up a wedding photo and dropping it directly into the trash. "Dad always said the best defense is a good offense." Isaiah's voice rose from outside. "What do you mean financial review? My personal finances have nothing to do with my job." "Want to bet?" I murmured, remembering Jarrett's carefully worded email to Isaiah's employers about concerns regarding financial impropriety. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jarrett. "Motion granted, all accounts frozen. How's the fallout?" "Nuclear," I texted back, watching Isaiah pace and plead on the phone. When he finally came back inside, he looked defeated. "They're putting me on administrative leave," he said quietly. "Pending investigation." "Karma's funny that way," I replied, sealing another box. "Actions have consequences." "Catherine, please," he tried one last time. "We can work this out. I'll break it off with Monica. I'll make it right." "Too late," I said, pulling off my wedding ring and placing it on the counter. "You should probably check on Monica, by the way. Last I heard, she was having trouble paying her bills. Funny how quickly love fades when the money runs out." As if on cue, his phone lit up with messages from Monica, each one more frantic than the last. I could see the moment reality hit him. Everything was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do about it. "I'll be staying with Giselle until I find a place," I informed him, picking up a box. "You can forward any mail to her address, though I doubt there'll be many credit card offers coming our way anymore. As Giselle and I carried boxes to her car, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back wasn't broken or defeated. She was stronger, wiser, and finally free of the lies that had surrounded her for so long. Behind me, I could hear Isaiah's phone ringing again. Monica's number flashed on the screen. I smiled, knowing that karma was just getting started. Living with Giselle was like going back in time to our teenage years, except now we drank wine instead of stealing sips from Dad's beer. Her spare bedroom became my sanctuary, and her constant support kept me from drowning in self-pity. "Look what came in the mail today," Giselle announced, waving an envelope as she walked into the kitchen. "Your first credit counseling certificate. One step closer to financial freedom." I was chopping vegetables for dinner, trying to adjust to my new budget-conscious lifestyle. Who knew bankruptcy could feel so empowering? "Speaking of empowerment," she said, pulling up a bar stool, "Jarrett's office called. They have a part-time position open in their legal department. He thought you might be interested, given your paralegal background." The knife paused mid-chop. "Really? It's been years since I worked in law." "Maybe it's time to get back in the game." She stole a piece of carrot. "Besides, you need something to keep your mind off the Isaiah situation." As if summoned by his name, my phone lit up with a text from our old neighbour. "Your ex is moving his girlfriend into a studio apartment in the sketchy part of town. Thought you'd want to know." "How the mighty have fallen," I murmured, showing Giselle the message. "You're not going to believe this," she said, pulling up her own phone. "Monica came into the hospital today for her pharmaceutical sales rounds. She was wearing knockoff everything. The other reps were whispering about it all day." I shouldn't have felt satisfied by that, but I did. Karma works faster than expected. The doorbell rang, interrupting our gossip session. Giselle answered it while I continued cooking. Her sharp intake of breath made me turn around. Monica stood in the doorway looking nothing like the polished homewrecker I remembered. Her designer clothes had been replaced by department store basics, and her perfectly maintained extensions were showing dark roots. "Catherine," she said, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" Giselle looked ready to slam the door in her face, but I held up a hand. 5 minutes. Monica perched awkwardly on the edge of the couch, clutching her knockoff purse like a shield. "I didn't know," she blurted out, "about the house, the money, any of it. Isaiah told me he was separated, that you'd agreed to the divorce." "And you believed him?" Giselle scoffed from her protective position near the door. "I wanted to," Monica admitted. "He promised me everything. A fresh start, a beautiful home, a future." She wiped at her eyes. "Now I'm about to be evicted, and he can barely afford to buy groceries." I continued chopping vegetables, the rhythmic sound filling the awkward silence. "Why are you here, Monica?" "I need help," she whispered. "My credit is ruined. I might lose my job. The other reps, they're saying things." "Karma's a bitch, isn't it?" I said calmly, adding the vegetables to the pot. "Please," she pleaded. "You're a good person, everyone says so. I know I don't deserve your help, but—" "You're right," I interrupted. "You don't." She stood up, shoulders slumping. "I understand. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Really sorry." As she turned to leave, I found myself saying, "Monica, try the credit counseling service at First Community Bank. Ask for Sarah. Tell her I sent you." Both Monica and Giselle stared at me in shock. "Why would you help her?" Giselle demanded after Monica left. I stirred the pot thoughtfully, because holding on to anger is exhausting. Besides, I added with a slight smile, watching her rebuild from nothing is better revenge than watching her crash and burn. Later that evening, as we sat down to our budget-friendly dinner, Giselle raised her water glass. "To new beginnings?" "To new beginnings," I agreed. "And speaking of which, call Jarrett. Tell him I'll take that job." My phone buzzed one last time that night, Isaiah trying to guilt me into unfreezing accounts. I deleted the message without reading it fully. Tomorrow I'd start my new job, begin rebuilding my credit, and focus on my future. Let Isaiah and Monica figure out their own mess. "You know what Dad used to say?" Giselle asked as we cleaned up dinner. The best revenge is a life well lived. I looked around at my sister's cozy kitchen, thought about the job waiting for me tomorrow, and felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Dad was right about a lot of things. The bankruptcy might have seemed like hitting bottom, but standing there in that kitchen, I realized it was actually my launching pad. Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what you're really worth. 2 months into my new job at Jarrett's law firm, I was sorting through bankruptcy files when Monica's message arrived. I need to tell you something about Isaiah. It's important. I ignored it, just like I'd ignored her previous attempts at contact. The last thing I needed was to get dragged back into their drama. But fate had other plans. "Catherine," Sarah from the front desk called out, "your ex-husband is here. He's demanding to see you." I looked up to find Isaiah standing in the office doorway, looking nothing like the polished executive he'd once been. His designer suit had been replaced by wrinkled khakis and an off-brand polo shirt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please." Jarrett appeared behind him. "Catherine, want me to call security?" "No," I sighed, standing up. "Let's get this over with. 5 minutes, in the conference room." Once the door closed behind us, Isaiah slumped into a chair. "I messed up. I messed up so bad, Catherine." "You're just realizing this now? Monica's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "And this is my problem because I can't support them," he said, running his hands through his unkempt hair. "The company fired me last week. Something about financial responsibility concerns affecting client trust. I can't even afford the studio apartment anymore. Still not seeing how this involves me. I need you to unfreeze the accounts," he pleaded. "Just temporarily, for the baby's sake." I laughed, but there was no humour in it. "You must be truly desperate to try that angle." "Catherine, please." "No," I cut him off. "You don't get to play the sympathy card. Not after what you did." "I'll lose everything." "Welcome to the club," I snapped. "How does it feel?" A knock at the door interrupted his response. Giselle poked her head in. We'd planned to meet for lunch. "Everything okay in here?" she asked, eyeing Isaiah suspiciously. "Tell her," Isaiah said. "Tell her about Monica." "Oh, you mean about the baby?" Giselle replied coolly. "Yeah, Monica told Catherine weeks ago, right after she found out you were still trying to date other women behind her back." Isaiah's head snapped up. "What?" "That's what she wanted to tell me," I explained, finally understanding Monica's message. "About catching you with someone else. Karma really does come full circle, doesn't it?" He slumped further in his chair. "I can fix this. I just need money to..." "To what?" I interrupted. "Buy your way out of consequences again? That's your problem, Isaiah. You think everything can be solved with money. But guess what? Money's gone, your reputation's gone, and now you get to experience exactly what you put me through." "I'll go to the media," he threatened weakly. "Tell them how you bankrupted us out of spite." Jarrett chose that moment to walk in. "I'd advise against that," he said calmly, "unless you want to explain to a judge how you committed fraud by selling marital property without consent." Isaiah's face crumpled. "What am I supposed to do?" "Get a job," I suggested. "A regular one like the rest of us. Pay your bills, take responsibility for your choices." "The baby. We'll have Monica as a mother," I finished. "And you as..." "Whatever you choose to be. But that's between you and her. I'm done being your safety net." He stood slowly, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I really loved you once, you know." "No," I replied quietly. "You loved what I could give you. There's a difference." After he left, Giselle wrapped me in a tight hug. "You okay?" "Surprisingly, yes." I gathered my purse for lunch. "You know what's funny? A few months ago, news of their baby would have destroyed me. Now, I just feel sorry for them." "Growth looks good on you," Jarrett commented from the doorway. "Speaking of growth," Giselle said as we headed out, "wait until you hear what Monica did. She's actually following your advice about credit counseling. Sarah says she's their most dedicated client. I thought about Monica, pregnant and struggling, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. About Isaiah, finally facing real consequences, about my own journey from victim to survivor. Maybe some good can come from all this mess, I mused. Like what? Giselle asked. Like learning that rock bottom can be a foundation if you're brave enough to build on it. As we walked to lunch, I deleted Isaiah's number from my phone. His problems weren't mine anymore. I had my own life to rebuild, and for the first time in months, I was actually excited about the future. You might want to sit down for this, Jarrett said, placing a thick folder on his desk. We found something while processing the bankruptcy paperwork. 4 months had passed since Isaiah's office confrontation, and I'd settled into a comfortable routine at the law firm. But Jarrett's expression told me my peace was about to be disturbed. How bad is it? I asked, sinking into the chair. Remember those investment accounts Isaiah claimed were empty? Jarrett opened the folder. They weren't. He'd been funneling money into offshore accounts for years, long before Monica. My stomach dropped. Years? At least 5. He spread out bank statements. And that's not all. We found evidence of systematic fraud. He wasn't just stealing from you. He was embezzling from his company. The door opened and Monica waddled in, now visibly pregnant. I'd invited her to this meeting after she'd reached out, claiming to have important information. Tell her what you told me, Jarrett encouraged. Monica sat carefully, hands protectively over her belly. I found documents in Isaiah's laptop. He's been running a scheme with fake vendor accounts. That's how he afforded everything. The gifts, the trips, the condo. It wasn't just your money he was spending. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because he's planning to leave the country, she replied, tears forming. He told me last night. He has a fake passport and everything. He's going to abandon me and the baby. Jarrett leaned forward. We've already contacted the FBI. They're building a case, but they need your help, both of you. My help? Monica's voice cracked. He'll kill me if he finds out I turned him in. He won't find out, I assured her, surprising myself with the protective instinct I felt toward my former rival. We'll make sure of it. Jarrett outlined the plan. The FBI needed documentation, witnesses, and a paper trail. Between my knowledge of our finances and Monica's access to recent information, we could help build an airtight case. There's something else, Monica said quietly. I'm not the first other woman. There were others before me. He had a pattern. Find someone vulnerable, promise them everything, use them to hide money, and then disappear when things get complicated, I finished, pieces clicking into place. Like he's planning to do to you. My phone buzzed, Giselle checking in. I quickly texted back, major developments. Come to Jarrett's office ASAP. We need to move fast, Jarrett said. If he suspects anything. A commotion outside interrupted him. Isaiah's voice carried through the door. I know she's in there. Catherine, we need to talk. Back entrance, Jarrett whispered, helping Monica up. My assistant will take you out. Catherine, keep him distracted. I opened the door to find Isaiah looking wild-eyed and desperate. What do you want now? I need money, he said, pushing past me into the office. Just a small loan. I have a business opportunity. In what country? I asked pointedly. He froze for a split second, long enough to confirm everything. What are you talking about? Drop the act, Isaiah. We know about the offshore accounts, the embezzlement, all of it. You don't know anything, he snarled, but his eyes darted nervously around the room. Actually, we do, Giselle said from the doorway, 2 FBI agents flanking her. And so do they. The colour drained from his face. This is a mistake. The only mistake, one agent said, stepping forward with handcuffs, was thinking you wouldn't get caught. As they led him away, he turned to me one last time. Catherine, please. I can explain everything. Save it for the judge, I replied, watching as they escorted him out. Monica emerged from the back room shaking. Is it over? Almost, Jarrett said. The FBI will need statements from both of you, but he's not going anywhere now. Giselle hugged me tight. You okay? I nodded, feeling oddly calm. You know what's strange? I actually feel sorry for him. He had everything. A good life, people who loved him, and he threw it all away for what? Money, status. Speaking of money, Jarrett interjected, once the FBI finishes their investigation, there's a good chance they'll recover some of the stolen funds. Both of you may be entitled to restitution. Monica burst into tears. I don't want his money. I just want my baby to have a chance at a normal life. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Then let's make sure that happens. Looking at Monica's tear-stained face, I realized something important. Sometimes the people you think are your enemies are just victims of the same betrayal. And sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected alliances. The courtroom fell silent as Isaiah was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual designer suits. 6 months had passed since his arrest, and today was the final hearing. Monica sat beside me, her hand resting on her now prominent belly. All rise, the bailiff called out. Judge Martinez took her seat, reviewing the papers before her. This is quite the case, Mr. Lawson. Embezzlement, fraud, unauthorized sale of marital property, attempted flight to avoid prosecution. Isaiah's lawyer stepped forward. Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement. Very well. Isaiah stood, his handcuffs clinking. I want to apologize to everyone I've hurt. To my company, to Catherine, to Monica. His voice cracked convincingly. I lost my way. If you give me another chance. Save the performance, Judge Martinez interrupted. I've read the victim impact statements. Would any of the victims like to speak? I stood up, my prepared statement forgotten as I looked at the man I'd once loved. Your Honor, Isaiah isn't sorry he did these things. He's sorry he got caught. He's standing there right now, probably already planning his next scheme. Objection, Isaiah's lawyer called out. Overruled. Continue, Mrs. Lawson. The money he stole, the lives he ruined, it wasn't just about greed. It was about power. Making people depend on him, then watching them crumble when he pulled the rug out. I took a deep breath. But here's the thing. We didn't crumble. We got stronger. Monica stood up next, her voice trembling but determined. I was an easy target. Young, ambitious, desperate to believe his lies. But now I see him for what he really is. A predator who preys on people's trust. Judge Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Lawson, you've pleaded guilty to all charges. Before I pronounce sentence, is there anything else you'd like to say? Isaiah's mask finally cracked. They're lying. Catherine bankrupted me out of spite. Monica's just angry because I wouldn't leave my wife for her. This whole thing is a setup. That's enough, the judge cut him off. I've heard and seen enough to make my decision. The sentence came down like thunder. 15 years in federal prison, restitution payments to all victims, and a lifetime ban from holding any financial positions. As they led him away, Isaiah shouted back at us, This isn't over. I'll appeal. Actually, Jarrett said, standing up from his seat behind us, it is over. The evidence is ironclad, and your guilty plea means no appeals. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Monica gripped my arm, overwhelmed by the attention. Mrs. Lawson, how does it feel to see your ex-husband sentenced? Ms. Hicks, will you be keeping the baby? Giselle pushed through the crowd, creating a path. No comments. Let them through. We escaped to a nearby cafe, where Monica collapsed into a chair, exhausted. I never thought I'd say this, but thank you, Catherine, for everything. How are you doing? I asked. Really? Scared, she admitted. Single mom, starting over. But at least I'm free of his lies. Jarrett joined us carrying a stack of papers. The FBI recovered most of the stolen funds. They'll be distributed once all the paperwork is processed. I don't want his money, Monica and I said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. Well, Giselle chimed in, why not use it for something good? Something that would drive Isaiah crazy? An idea sparked. Monica, you mentioned wanting to start your own business someday, right? She nodded. A wellness consulting firm, but with the baby coming. What if we partnered up? I suggested. Your pharmaceutical sales experience, my legal background, we could help people navigate medical and insurance bureaucracy. Monica's eyes widened. You'd want to work with me, after everything? Think about it, I said. 2 women he tried to destroy, building something positive together. It's the perfect karma. Jarrett pulled out his phone. I have some clients who might be interested in that kind of service, and the startup costs could be covered by the restitution funds. Poetic justice, Giselle grinned, using his money to help others while he sits in prison. Monica wiped away tears. I don't deserve this second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance, I said. Well, almost everyone. I glanced at the newspaper headline about Isaiah's sentencing. As we sat there planning our future, I realized something profound. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best opportunities. Isaiah had tried to destroy both of us, but instead he'd inadvertently created something stronger than his lies. A partnership built on shared survival and redemption. To new beginnings? Monica offered, raising her water glass. To karma, I replied, clinking glasses. And to writing our own endings. Patient advocacy isn't just about fighting insurance companies, I explained to our newest client. It's about understanding your rights and having someone in your corner. Our office buzzed with activity. Through the glass partition, I could see Monica expertly handling calls while bouncing baby Emma in her carrier. The wellness consulting firm had grown faster than either of us expected, with a steady stream of clients seeking help navigating medical bureaucracy. Catherine? Giselle poked her head in. There's a letter from the prison. My heart skipped. Setting it aside, I finished with my client before opening the envelope. Inside was a familiar handwriting. Dear Catherine, I heard about your success with Monica. Using my restitution money to help others, it's clever. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for. I'm writing because... I crumpled the letter and dropped it in the shredder. Not interested in his latest manipulation? Monica asked, walking in with Emma. Some chapters need to stay closed, I replied, reaching for the baby. How's our littlest team member doing? Growing too fast, Monica smiled. The daycare downstairs is amazing. I still can't believe we pulled this off. Jarrett appeared in the doorway. Ladies, your next appointment is here, and you're going to want to hear this one. A woman entered, clutching a familiar-looking folder. I found your website after reading about your story, she said. My husband. He's doing exactly what Isaiah did. The secret accounts, the mysterious business trips. Monica and I exchanged glances. We'd heard variations of this story before. What's your name? I asked gently. Rachel. And I'm terrified. He controls everything. The money, the house. Not anymore, Monica said firmly, pulling up a chair. Tell us everything. We'll help you create an exit strategy. As Rachel shared her story, I pulled up our resource database. First step, protecting your assets. We have a great legal team and... A commotion outside interrupted us. Through the window, I spotted a familiar face arguing with security. Isaiah's former business partner. Stay here, I told Rachel, stepping out to confront him. You think you're so clever, he spat, building this little empire on his money. Actually, Jarrett said, materializing beside me, they built it on hard work and integrity. Two concepts you might want to Google while awaiting your own trial. The man deflated slightly. The feds are investigating me too. I need... Legal advice? I suggested. Try the public defender's office. We only help victims, not perpetrators. After security escorted him out, Monica joined me by the window. You okay? Better than okay, I smiled. Remember when we thought our lives were over because of Isaiah? And now we're helping other women avoid the same trap, she nodded. Emma will grow up seeing what strong women can do. Giselle brought in coffee for everyone. Rachel's ready to take the first steps. Should I set her up with Sarah at credit counselling? And schedule a meeting with Jarrett, I added. We'll need to move fast before her husband suspects anything. Looking around our office, at Monica confidently soothing both Emma and Rachel, at Giselle coordinating with our team, at the wall of thank you cards from clients we'd helped. I felt a profound sense of peace. Your next appointment's here too, Giselle announced. The support group for financial abuse survivors. The conference room filled with women, each carrying their own story of betrayal and resilience. As Monica and I shared our experiences, I saw hope replace fear in their eyes. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you, I told them, becomes the foundation for the best thing you'll ever do. And sometimes, Monica added, adjusting Emma's blanket, the person you thought was your enemy becomes your strongest ally. After the meeting, Rachel lingered. I was going to give up, she admitted. Just let him take everything. But seeing what you've built... Take it from someone who's been there, I said. Rock bottom is just the beginning. You're stronger than you know. The day wound down, and as I gathered my things, I found another crumpled letter from Isaiah in my desk. This one joined the first in the shredder, unread. His words had no power anymore. Monica appeared in my doorway. Dinner at Giselle's? Wouldn't miss it, I smiled, grabbing my bag. Hey, Monica. Remember when you came to apologize that first time? God, I was so scared and desperate. Look at us now. We walked out together, passing the sign that read Phoenix Advocacy Partners, rising above financial abuse. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in colours of hope and renewal. We hadn't just survived, we'd transformed our pain into purpose, our betrayal into brotherhood, our ending into a new beginning. And somewhere in a federal prison, Isaiah would never understand that his greatest act of destruction had created something beautiful instead.
At first glance, my life with Mark seemed like a page ripped straight out of a glossy magazine. We were the perfect pair, the enviable couple. I, Monica, the diligent accountant, and he, the dashing new head of the department. Our story began at the office, where quick chats by the coffee machine blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Can't believe my luck, Mark would often say, his arm wrapped around me. From colleagues to life partners. It's like we were meant to be. I'd smile, nod, and play along. Yeah, who would have thought? The dream team, both at work and home. But as the pages of our story turned, the dream began to show its cracks. After we moved into my personal home, Mark's true colors started to seep through the facade of the perfect husband. He wanted the traditional setup, him, the breadwinner, me, the housewife. It's how it should be, Monica, he'd insist. My mom did it, your mom did it. It's tradition. I wanted to argue, to say that times had changed, but I swallowed my words. The prospect of starting a family, of building our little world, was too tempting. So, I hung up my accountant's hat and embraced the role of a housewife, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. The first drops hit when I noticed the trail of socks and underwear Mark left around the house. Seriously, Mark? Am I married to a man or a centipede? I joke, trying to keep the mood light. He'd laugh it off, clueless or indifferent to the chaos he was creating. Come on, Monica. It's just socks. No big deal. But it was a big deal. It was the dishes left by the TV, the pizza boxes on the armchair, the complete disregard for the sanctity of our home. I tried to talk to him, to make him see reason. Mark, this isn't working. You need to clean up after yourself. This is our home, not a frat house. His reaction was always the same, anger, defensiveness, and a barrage of excuses. I work all day, Monica. I don't have time for this. You're the housewife, remember? This is your job. Cooking, cleaning, trying to keep the peace, it was a never-ending cycle, a dance I performed to the tune of Mark's whims. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered, a silent scream against the life I was trapped in. Life with Mark's parents felt like a constant invasion. They had this way of just storming into our house, their presence as subtle as a sledgehammer. They never bothered to call ahead, they'd just show up, expecting to be fed and entertained. One afternoon, I was caught off guard by the sound of the doorbell. As I opened the door, there they were, Mark's parents, bags of shopping in hand, looking like they'd just claimed victory in some sort of retail battle. Well, aren't you going to invite us in, Monica? Mark's mom, Judy, asked with a tone that brooked no argument. I managed a weak smile, stepping aside. Of course, come on in. They made a beeline for the kitchen, settling themselves at the table as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "We thought we'd stop by. You know, save you the trouble of cooking for just you and Mark," Judy declared, unloading her shopping bags with a clatter. Stan, Mark's dad, chimed in, already eyeing the fridge. "Yeah, and we figured you'd appreciate the company." "What's for lunch then, Monica?" I felt a pang of irritation. My home, my sanctuary, had turned into a pit stop for their convenience. "I was just about to make some sandwiches," I said, trying to hide my frustration. Sandwiches turned into a full-blown meal as I found myself chopping, stirring, and frying, trying to meet their unspoken expectations. Mark wasn't any help. He'd just slump on the couch, his eyes glued to the TV, completely oblivious to the circus in the kitchen. Later, after they'd left, I tried to talk to Mark about it. "Your parents can't just drop by like this, Mark. It's exhausting. I can't even relax in my own home." He barely looked up from his phone. "Oh, come on, Monica. They're just being friendly. It's not a big deal." I could feel my patience wearing thin. "It is a big deal, Mark. I'm not here to wait on you and your parents hand and foot. I need some space, some respect." But my words seemed to bounce right off him. "They're family, Monica. That's just how family is. Besides, they think you enjoy it." I'd look in the mirror, the reflection staring back at me a far cry from the woman who once walked the office halls in sharp suits and high heels. Now, it was all baggy sweaters and messy buns, my appearance a casualty of the endless demands of my home life. I missed those days, the click-clack of my heels, the sense of purpose each morning brought. Now, my days were a whirlwind of pots and pans, of cleaning up after uninvited guests who treated my home like a pit stop. As the days turned into months, life with Mark grew colder, the distance between us widening like a chasm. His behavior started changing, subtle shifts at first, then more pronounced. A new haircut that made him look years younger, suits that screamed of trying too hard, and a scent that wasn't his usual. It was like he was morphing into someone else, someone I didn't recognize. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just a phase, a midlife crisis maybe. But the nagging suspicion in my mind refused to be silenced. It gnawed at me, kept me awake at night. "Mark, is there something you're not telling me?" I finally asked one evening, the words spilling out before I could stop them. We were sitting at the dinner table, an ocean of silence between us. He looked up, startled, like he'd been caught off guard. "What do you mean, Monica?" "I'm not hiding anything." But his eyes, they darted away too quickly, his words a little too rushed. "It's just, you've changed, Mark. The clothes, the perfume. It's like you're a different person." He let out a forced chuckle, but there was no warmth in it. "Come on, Monica. A man can't spruce himself up? I'm just trying to keep things fresh, that's all." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But the doubts, once sown, refused to be uprooted. They grew, fed by his late nights at the office, the weekends he was suddenly too busy, the texts he'd quickly hide when I walked in. The truth, however brutal, couldn't be ignored any longer. So, when he stood up at one of those awkward dinners with his parents, his announcement hit me not like a surprise, but like a confirmation of what I'd already known deep down. "I'm filing for divorce, Monica," he declared, his voice steady, devoid of any emotion. "I've met someone else. Someone young, vibrant. She's everything you're not." The words cut through the room, leaving a trail of shock and disbelief. His parents looked from him to me, their expressions a mix of confusion and dismay. "Mark, what are you saying? This is your wife, for heaven's sake," his mom exclaimed, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "Yeah, son. You can't just throw away your marriage like this," his dad chimed in, his brow furrowed in concern. But Mark was relentless, his words a dagger twisting in my heart. "It's decided. I want a family, a son. And Monica, well, she's not up to it. She's let herself go." It's time for a fresh start. His mistress, he painted her like a trophy, a prize he'd won, while painting me, his wife of 5 years, as a worn-out shoe, discarded and forgotten. The divorce papers he slid across the table were just a formality, his signature a cold, impersonal stroke of ink. But as I took them, something inside me shifted. The pain, the betrayal, it sparked a fire, a determination to not let this be the end of my story. "Fine, Mark. I'm offering you a probation period," I said, my voice steady, my resolve firm. 3 months. If you succeed, I will give you a divorce without further ado. His smirk said it all. He thought he'd won, thought he'd broken me. But little did he know, he'd just awakened a sleeping tiger. Mark packed his things, his smugness almost tangible as he prepared to move in with his mistress. I watched him, my expression unreadable. "Enjoy your probation period, Mark. Make sure she's worth it." His grin was all the confirmation I needed that he had no idea what was coming. The moment he left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was time for a fresh start, and not just for me. The moment I suggested the probation period, I knew it was a gamble. My friend, Lisa, thought I'd completely lost it. We sat in my kitchen, the room still echoing with the remnants of Mark's departure. "Monica, this is madness," Lisa exclaimed, her eyebrows knitted in concern. "You're just giving him a free pass to walk all over you." I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me. "No, Lisa. This isn't surrender. It's strategy. Mark thinks he's playing me, but he's actually walking right into my trap." Lisa looked skeptical, her arms crossed. "And what about his parents? They treat your place like a drive-through. You going to let that slide too?" A smirk tugged at the corner of my lips. "Oh, they're part of the plan too. Just wait and see." Sure enough, the very next day, as if on cue, Mark's parents barged in, their uninvited presence as predictable as ever. This time, though, I was ready. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path with a newfound resolve. "Monica, dear, move aside. We're famished," Mark's mom, Judy, declared, trying to push past me. "Not so fast," I said, standing my ground. "You're both on a 3-month probation period, just like Mark." The confusion on their faces was almost comical. "Probation period? What nonsense is this?" Mark's dad, Ron, blustered, his face turning a shade of red I hadn't seen before. "You heard me," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "It's time for some ground rules. My house isn't a diner, and I'm not your personal chef. Respect that, or find somewhere else to eat." Judy's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. "But we're family, Monica. You can't just..." "I can, and I am," I interrupted, the power of taking control surging through me. "Family or not, everyone needs to respect my space. You've had a free pass for too long." Ron looked like he was about to argue further, but Judy placed a hand on his arm, a silent signal. They exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, with a huff, Ron nodded. "Fine, Monica. We'll respect your probation period," he grumbled, the words clearly leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. The silence in the house was deafening after Mark and his parents left. It was the first time in years I had the space to just breathe. I looked around, taking in the quiet, and something inside me clicked. This was my chance, my time to rediscover the Monica I'd buried under layers of compromise and sacrifice. I started with small steps. First, it was the clutter Mark had left behind. I gathered his things, boxing them up, each item a farewell to the life I'd known. "This is for you, Monica," I whispered to myself. No looking back. Next, I tackled the mirror. The reflection staring back at me was a far cry from the vibrant woman I used to be. "Time to change that," I said, my voice a mix of determination and excitement. I rummaged through my closet, pushing past the shapeless clothes I'd hidden behind. Deep down, I found the outfits I'd worn back in my accounting days, sharp, chic, a reminder of the confident woman I was. I dressed, the fabric feeling like armor, and for the first time in ages, I smiled at my reflection. The transformation didn't stop there. I hit the ground running, literally. Each morning, I laced up my sneakers and pounded the pavement, the rhythm of my steps a chant of empowerment. "You're doing this, Monica. For you?" I'd tell myself as the miles flew by. My diet changed too. No more quick fixes or catering to uninvited guests. I cooked for one, savoring each meal as a celebration of my newfound independence. The beauty salon became my sanctuary. I sat in the stylist's chair, the buzz of the scissors a melody of change. "Just do it," I told the stylist. "I'm ready for a new me." And so, my hair was cut, my style revamped. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see Monica, I saw strength, resilience, the beauty of a woman reborn. One evening, as I reveled in the quiet of my home, Lisa dropped by, unannounced, but always welcome. Her jaw dropped when she saw me. "Monica, is that really you?" she gasped, her eyes wide with amazement. I laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "The one and only." "What do you think?" Lisa circled me, her expression one of pure awe. I think Mark won't know what hit him." "You're stunning, Monica. Truly." The compliment warmed my heart, but I knew the transformation ran deeper than appearances. "It's not for Mark, Lisa. It's for me. I'm rediscovering the Monica I lost, and you know what? She's pretty amazing." Lisa hugged me, her support as unwavering as ever. "She always was, Monica. She always was." With my confidence restored and my spirit unbroken, I took the next step. I dusted off my resume, the document a testament to my skills and achievements. Interviews were lined up, each one an opportunity, a doorway to the future I was building for myself. 2 months after Mark's departure, my quiet routine was interrupted by a call that I had anticipated, yet it still held a tinge of surprise. Mark's name flashed on my phone screen, and I answered with a mix of curiosity and a well-concealed sense of triumph. "Monica, I need your help." Mark's voice came through, tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard before. "She's left me. Said she couldn't deal with my habits, the socks, the mess. I'm alone, Monica." I leaned against the kitchen counter, a sly smile playing on my lips. "Really, Mark? That's unfortunate. But what exactly do you want from me now?" His voice cracked slightly. "I want to come back, Monica. I realize I made a mistake. Can we meet? Please?" The words I had been waiting to say came out smoothly. "All right, Mark. Let's have dinner this Saturday at our place. We'll talk then." I could hear the relief mixed with a note of triumph in his voice. "Thank you, Monica. I'll be there. I knew you'd give us another chance." After the call, the wheels in my mind began to turn. This dinner would be more than just a meal, it would be my stage. I promptly called Mark's parents, extending the invitation for what I knew would be an unforgettable evening. "Judy, Ron, I thought you should join us for dinner this Saturday. Mark will be there," I said, my voice steady and inviting. Judy's response was quick and enthusiastic. "Oh, Monica, that's wonderful news. We've been so worried about you too. It's about time things went back to normal." Ron's voice rumbled through the phone. "Yes, we're looking forward to it, Monica. It's good to have the family back together." Little did they know that normal was the furthest thing from what this dinner was going to be about. I spent the next few days planning not just the menu, but also how I would articulate the newfound clarity and strength I had garnered in their absence. Saturday arrived, bringing with it a moment I had anticipated yet dreaded. The doorbell's chime echoed through the house, a herald of the impending confrontation. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There stood Mark, suitcases in tow, a smirk painting his face. Behind him, Judy and Ron loomed, their expressions a mixture of hope and silent expectations. "I knew you'd come to your senses," Mark said, his voice dripping with a misplaced confidence as his eyes roamed over the new me. Wow, Monica, you look incredible. See, I told you she'd come around, he said, turning to his parents with an air of triumph. Judy chimed in, her voice tinged with relief. Oh, Monica, we're so glad. It's about time things got back to how they were. I motioned for them to sit, my demeanor calm but firm. Please, let's settle down. We have much to discuss. As we gathered in the living room, an awkward tension hung in the air, thick and palpable. Mark, with a misplaced sense of victory, took the lead. Monica, I can't tell you how good it is to be back. I've missed us. And you've really changed. I met his gaze, my own unwavering. I didn't change for you. I changed for me. Mark, what you're seeing isn't a welcome back. It's a goodbye. The shock on his face was mirrored in his parents' expressions. Judy's hand flew to her mouth, and Ron's brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean, Monica? Judy managed to ask, her voice a quiver of disbelief. Mark left because he thought he'd found something better. But life outside wasn't what he expected, was it? I said, turning my attention back to Mark, who seemed to shrink under the weight of my words. It's not like that, Monica. I realized I made a mistake. That woman, she was nothing compared to you. She left because she couldn't handle, well, the things you always took care of. Mark stuttered, his bravado fading with each word. You mean your mess, your irresponsibility? I corrected him sharply. And now you think you can just waltz back in here, back into my life? Judy interjected, her voice laced with desperation. But Monica, he's realized his mistake. Can't you give him another chance? No, Judy. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill, not destroying a marriage. And Ron, you both need to understand that my home is not your convenience. I continued, addressing each of them, making sure my stance was clear. Ron, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. But we're family, Monica. Family sticks together. That's just it, Ron. Family respects each other. Mark disrespected our marriage, and you both disrespected my home. That's not family, that's taking advantage. Mark, now fully deflated, made one last plea. Monica, please, I have nowhere else to go. I'll change, I swear. I stood up, my resolve as solid as ever. It's too late for promises, Mark. We're done. And as for having nowhere to go, that was your choice when you left. I've moved on. You gave me these divorce papers, I said, holding them up. And I signed them. We'd been officially divorced for 2 months. The room went silent, the shock palpable in the air. Mark's parents looked from him to me, disbelief written all over their faces. You're divorced? Judy finally managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded. Yes, and now, I'd like Mark to collect his things and leave my house. And Judy, Ron, I wish you well, but from now on, my home is my own, I declared, the finality in my tone broking no argument. Mark was grasping at straws now, desperation clear in his voice. Monica, please, I made a mistake. I'll change, I promise. I'll clean, I'll cook, I'll do anything. But my decision was firm. It's too late, Mark. It's over between us. And just so you know, I got a job as an accountant while you were away. I don't need you to take care of me. He was floundering, his pleas becoming more frantic. But Monica, you can't do this. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore, Mark. If you don't leave, I'll call the police, I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. At that point, Judy and Ron stood up, their faces a mix of disappointment and realization. They approached Mark, each taking one of his arms. Let's go, son. You've made your bed, now you have to lie in it, Ron said, his voice heavy with resignation. Before they left, Judy turned to me, her eyes softening. Monica, you're right. Our son was a fool to let a woman like you go. Life, after Mark and his parents' departure, settled into a rhythm that was all my own. I heard bits and pieces about Mark through the grapevine, friends who couldn't help but share the latest gossip. They said he was living with his parents again, struggling to find his footing in a world where he couldn't just rely on someone else to clean up his messes. "Monica, you won't believe what I saw today," Lisa said one afternoon, her voice a mix of amusement and disbelief. "Mark was at the grocery store, and let me tell you, he looked rough. Hair all over the place, clothes mismatched. It's like he's lost without you." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of vindication. "Well, Lisa, that's what happens when you take everything for granted. Eventually, you have to face the consequences." The word was that Mark tried his hand at dating again, but no surprise, it didn't go too well. The same issues that drove me away were now driving away other potential partners. "He's demanding, messy, just a lot to handle," a mutual friend shared. "No one wants to put up with that." I nodded, a sense of closure enveloping me. "Some lessons are learned the hard way," I said, not without a hint of satisfaction. As for me, life had taken a turn for the better, a stark contrast to the disheveled, pathetic figure Mark had become. I got a job as an accountant again, my mind sharp, my contributions valued. The office was a buzz of activity, a place where I thrived, surrounded by numbers and reports. And it wasn't just my career that had taken a turn for the better. My personal life was blossoming too. There was someone new, someone who was everything Mark wasn't. His name was Daniel, and he brought a sense of calm, a respect that I had longed for. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, my life was a testament to resilience, a story of rising from the ashes. Mark, now just a distant memory, was a reminder of what I had overcome. I was Monica, no longer the shadow of someone else's demands or expectations. They say life's a journey, and mine sure started on a bumpy road. My folks, Jane and Robert, were the kind that knew the grind all too well. They didn't have much in the way of fancy degrees or fat wallets, but they had hearts of gold and a dream for me bigger than the sky. "Dream big, work hard, Zoya," Dad would say every morning as he tied his worn-out boots, ready for another day at the factory. Mom, with her gentle smile, would pack my lunch, her hands rough from years of juggling odd jobs. I was their golden ticket, their dream of a better life, and they poured every penny they could spare into a jar labeled "Her Future." It wasn't just loose change, it was their sweat, their hope, and their love, all clinking together in that old glass jar. High school was where the rubber met the road. I hit the books hard, determined not to let my folks down. Evenings were a family affair, with Mom quizzing me on my homework and Dad sharing stories about the value of every hard-earned dollar. Then came the letter that changed everything. A thick, fancy envelope with the words "Admission Confirmed" printed on the front. I'd made it into one of the top colleges to study financial analysis. The joy in our little house was palpable. Mom cried, Dad hugged me so tight I thought I might break, and that night, we had a celebration dinner, nothing fancy, just our favorite stew, but it tasted like victory. College life was a whole new world. I was a small fish in a big pond now, but I wasn't about to float, I was there to swim. To keep afloat financially, I started tutoring. It was during one of these sessions that I met Mike. He was a bit rough around the edges, always had his cap on backward, and seemed more interested in cracking jokes than cracking books. "You know, you'd learn faster if you stopped trying to make me laugh all the time," I chided him during one of our sessions. Mike just grinned, that lopsided grin that I'd soon learn to love. "And you'd be less stressed if you laughed a bit more. Balance, you know?" Our study sessions soon turned into long conversations, laughter, and eventually, something more. He was different from anyone I'd ever met. He had this way of looking at life, unfiltered, unpretentious, just real. But life's not just about the good times, is it? It's about the grind, the hustle, the unending push to keep moving forward. That's what my parents taught me, and that's what I was determined to do, Mike by my side or not. Life after college was like stepping onto a whole new playing field. I landed a gig at a top firm right off the bat. All those nights hitting the books paid off, and I was ready to roll up my sleeves and dive into the world of finance. It was all high rises, sharp suits, and numbers that made your head spin. And let me tell you, it felt good. Real good. Mike, on the other hand, he was treading water. Jobs for him were like buses, you miss one, and you're waiting ages for the next. When he finally landed something, it was clear his paycheck wasn't gonna stack up against mine. At first, it hung in the air like a bad smell. Mike would come home, his pride a little bruised, and I'd be there, trying to lighten the mood. "Hey, it's not about who brings in what," I'd say, slinging an arm around him as we sat down to some takeout after a long day. "We're a team, right?" "Yeah, a team," he'd mumble, but the crease in his brow told me he wasn't buying it. But as time ticked by, we settled into our rhythm. Our love wasn't about who paid for dinner or who had the fancier job title. It was about those quiet nights in, the laughter that filled our tiny apartment, and the dreams we whispered to each other in the dark. We tied the knot one summer's day. Nothing fancy, just a bunch of our closest friends and family, a local band, and a whole lot of love. It felt like the world was ours, and nothing could touch us. "Can you believe it?" "Mrs. and Mr." Mike said, his arm slung around my shoulder as we watched the sun dip below the horizon, the party winding down around us. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of the moment wrap around us. "Believe it?" "I've been waiting for it," I teased, and we both laughed, the sound mingling with the soft clinking of glasses and the distant murmur of conversations. Life was good, even if it wasn't always easy. We had our share of bumps, like any couple. Bills piled up, and sometimes the end of the month had us digging deep into the couch cushions looking for spare change. But we made it work. Mike's job, well, it wasn't what he dreamt of, but it paid the bills, and he found joy in the little things. Like the way he'd come home, a grin spread across his face, holding some cheap trinket he found at a thrift store, claiming it was a treasure. "Look at this, Zoya," he'd chuckle, holding up a lamp that looked like it had seen better days. "It's got character." I'd roll my eyes, but inside, I loved that about him. He could find the silver lining in a storm cloud. Then there were nights when the weight of it all would press down on us. Nights when Mike would stare out the window, a cold cup of coffee in his hands, his thoughts a million miles away. "You ever think about where we're headed?" he'd ask, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd sit beside him, our shoulders touching, sharing the burden. "All the time. But I know wherever it is, we're headed there together." And he'd nod, the ghost of a smile crossing his lips, and that was enough. It had to be. We were just two kids from the block, trying to make a life together. We had love, we had dreams, and we had each other. And back then, that felt like enough. Stability's a funny thing, you know? One minute you're on top of the world, and the next, it's like the rug's been pulled out from under you. That's what happened to us. My fancy job, the one I thought was rock solid, crumbled like a house of cards. The day it all went down, I remember walking into the office like any other Monday. But the air was different, tense, like a storm was about to hit. And boy, did it hit. The boss called us into the conference room, his face ashen, words stumbling over each other. "Bankruptcy," he said. That one word echoed in my ears, a death knell to all our dreams. I came home that night, my mind a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Mike was there, sprawled on the couch, a game flickering on the TV. He looked up, saw my face, and immediately knew. "What's wrong, babe?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were searching, worried. I just stood there, the words stuck in my throat. "Job's gone. The company's bankrupt." For a moment, there was just silence, the kind that screams louder than any shout. Then Mike was on his feet, his hands on my shoulders. "Hey, Zoya, look at me. We'll figure this out, okay? You're the smartest person I know. If anyone can bounce back, it's you." But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Rejection after rejection piled up, each one a reminder of the failure that seemed to cling to my name. The industry was cruel, unforgiving. We respect your credentials, but cut deeper each time. Mike did what he could, his paycheck barely enough to keep us afloat. But I saw the strain in his eyes, the way his smile didn't quite reach them anymore. One evening, I found him at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a bad hand of cards. He didn't hear me come in, just kept muttering to himself, numbers and curses tangled up. Mike? He looked up, his face drawn, tired. How did we get here, huh? Used to be we worried about what takeout to get, now it's about which bill can wait till next month. I sat down, took his hand. We knew life wasn't gonna be a straight road, right? We've hit a bump, a big one, but we'll get over it. Together. Mike shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. Together? Look at us. You're jobless, and I'm barely scraping by. This isn't what we signed up for. His words stung, a slap of reality I wasn't ready for. So what, you're saying I'm not trying? You think I like being stuck here, useless? No, that's not what I mean. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched in every line of his face. It's just hard, you know? Feels like no matter how hard I paddle, we're sinking. I wanted to say something, anything, to fix it, to make the hurt in his eyes go away. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, we sat there, together yet miles apart, the weight of our crumbling world pressing down on us. Betrayal, they say, cuts deeper than a knife. It's a wound that festers, a poison that spreads until everything you once held dear is tainted. That's what it felt like when Mike turned on me. It started with snide remarks, little jabs here and there. At first, I tried to brush it off, chalk it up to stress, to the pressure we were both under. But as the days dragged on, those jabs turned into full-blown attacks. Another day, another stack of rejection letters, huh? Mike's voice was harsh, nothing like the warm tones I fell in love with. I looked up from the pile of envelopes on the table, my heart sinking. I'm trying, Mike. You know I am. He snorted, a cold, mocking sound. Trying? What good is trying if it gets us nowhere? You know how much I'm stretching every dollar to keep us afloat here? I felt the sting of his words, the unfairness of it all burning in my chest. You think I don't know that? You think I like sitting here, feeling like a burden? A burden? Well, if the shoe fits. His words were a slap in the face, a confirmation of my worst fears. I stood up, my hands shaking. I can't believe this. After all we've been through, this is how you talk to me? Mike's face was hard, unyielding. Face it, we're sinking and you're just dead weight. I'm done carrying you. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of Mike's words haunting the silence. I thought about everything we had been through, all the dreams we had shared. And I realized that the man lying next to me, the man I had built my life with, was a stranger to me now. The final blow came a few days later. I came home to find Mike in the living room, but he wasn't alone. The woman with him was young, too young, with a smirk that made my blood boil. Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence, Mike sneered as I stood frozen in the doorway. The woman giggled, a high, grating sound. Is this the famous wife? The one who can't hold down a job? I felt the room spin, my heart pounding in my ears. Mike, what is this? Mike stood up, his eyes cold. This is me moving on. I'm done with you, with this sham of a marriage. He threw a stack of papers at me, the word divorce glaring up at me in bold letters. Consider this your eviction notice too. I want you out. I looked from the papers to Mike, to the woman still smirking on the couch. I was numb, the pain too deep, too raw to comprehend. Without a word, I grabbed my coat and my bag, the life I had known slipping through my fingers like sand. Life has a funny way of kicking you when you're down, but it's also got a knack for throwing you a lifeline just when you're about to sink. That's what happened to me the day I wandered into Linda's salon, a place I used to frequent back in my better days. My mind was a mess, my heart in pieces. I must have looked a sight, sitting there on one of those plush chairs, staring blankly at the mirror, seeing a stranger looking back. Linda, with her keen eyes and kind heart, must have seen the storm brewing inside me. She approached, her step soft, her voice gentle. "Honey, you look like you could use a friend," she said, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I looked up, met her gaze in the mirror, and before I knew it, the floodgates opened. Words poured out, raw and unfiltered, the story of my downfall, my betrayal, my brokenness. Linda listened, really listened, her nods and soft murmurs a balm to my battered soul. When I finally fell silent, she gave my hand a squeeze. "You know, Zoya," she started, her tone thoughtful, "I've been looking for someone to help me manage this place. Business is good, but it's getting too much for just me to handle." I blinked, her words not quite registering. "Me? Manage a salon? But I'm a financial analyst, or at least, I was. I know nothing about running a beauty salon." Linda chuckled, a warm, rich sound. "Oh, honey, skills can be taught, learned. But character, grit, determination, now those are things you either have or you don't. And you, my dear, have them in spades." I stared at her, the offer sinking in. It was crazy, totally left field. Me, running a salon? But then, what did I have to lose? My career was in tatters, my personal life a disaster. I don't know what to say, Linda," I stammered, my mind racing. "Say you'll think about it," she suggested, her smile reassuring. "No pressure. But I've got a good feeling about this, about you. And hey, it comes with a place to stay. The apartment upstairs is vacant, and I'd be happy to cut you a deal on the rent." I was floored. A job and a place to stay? It was more than I could have hoped for in my darkest hour. It was a chance, a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the endless night. "Linda, thank you. I'll think about it, I promise," I managed to say, my voice thick with unshed tears. She gave my hand another squeeze. "Take your time, honey. But remember, sometimes the best opportunities are the ones we never saw coming." I left the salon that day with a lighter heart than I'd had in months. The road ahead was uncertain, scary even. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight. Starting over ain't easy, especially when you're building from scratch. But sometimes, life gives you a second shot, and you've just gotta grab it with both hands. That's what I did at Linda's salon. It was a world away from the high-flying finance scene, but it had its own rhythm, its own pulse. And before long, I found myself getting into the groove of it. Linda was more than a boss, she was a mentor, a friend. She showed me the ropes, from managing bookings to handling the most colorful of clients. I threw myself into the work, letting it consume me, heal me. One day, after closing, we sat down, a couple of cold drinks in hand, going over the accounts. The numbers were looking good, better than good. "You've got a real knack for this, you know," Linda said, her eyes sparkling with pride. I shrugged, a small smile playing on my lips. "Guess I've always been good with numbers. And people." She nodded, taking a sip of her drink. "It's more than that. You've got vision, drive. You've turned this place around. Heck, you're pulling in clients like I've never seen before." I chuckled, the sound surprising even to myself. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. I just figured, why not try something new? What did we have to lose? Linda's smile widened. "That's the spirit. And speaking of trying something new, I've been thinking." The way she trailed off, that twinkle in her eye, I knew she was onto something big. "Out with it, Linda. What's cooking in that brain of yours?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to an excited whisper. "Expansion. This place is just the start. I'm thinking a chain, a brand. And I want you in on it. As a partner." The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. A partner. Me. After everything that had crumbled, here was a chance to build something new, something mine. Linda, are you sure? That's a huge step. She nodded, her gaze steady. I've never been sure of anything. You're not just rebuilding your life, you're helping me build my dream. We're a team, and together, we're unstoppable. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of her words sink in. This was it, a new chapter, a new beginning. From the ashes of my old life, here I was, rising, stronger, fiercer. All right, Linda. Let's do it. Let's build something amazing together. And we did. We worked hard, turning one salon into a chain of salons. Each new opening was a victory, a testament to our grit, our partnership. We were more than just a business, we were a force, a brand that stood for resilience, for beauty, for empowerment. Looking back, I couldn't believe how far I'd come. From the depths of despair to the heights of success. It wasn't just about the salons, the money, the recognition. It was about finding myself, my strength, my worth. The warm, inviting atmosphere of the salon buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving streets outside. I was there, in my element, wrapping up Mrs. Jenkins' hairdo, her laughter mingling with the soft tunes playing in the background. The salon, my pride and joy, was more than just a business, it was a sanctuary, a testament to my journey. Mrs. Jenkins, with her sharp wit and warm heart, was in the middle of one of her famous anecdotes when the door burst open, sending a draft through the room. The chatter dipped into silence as Mike, my past mistake, walked in, swagger in his step, that same arrogant girl from years ago, clinging to his arm. His laughter, loud and mocking, sliced through the calm. What's this? Zoya? The high-flying financial whiz turned scissor-happy hairdresser? The girl with him, all smug smiles and judgmental glances, chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. Really hit rock bottom, haven't you? From boardroom to this, quaint little salon. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. I felt Mrs. Jenkins' grip tighten around my hand, her presence a silent pillar of strength. Without missing a beat, Mrs. Jenkins rose from her chair, her stature small, but her presence enormous. You listen here, you ignorant fool. This woman, this hair snipper as you call her, she owns this place. Not just this one, but a whole chain of them. She's been in the papers, recognized as one of the most successful entrepreneurs around. Mike's smirk wavered, his companion's laughter faltering into an awkward silence. Mrs. Jenkins leaned in, her voice a fierce whisper that filled the room. And you, I've seen you, parading around town, always a drink in hand, always on the brink of another shambles. It's you who's the embarrassment, not her. You're the one tossed from job to job like a rag doll. The salon was still, the air thick with tension. Mike, once towering with arrogance, now seemed smaller, his bravado fading under the weight of truth. He tried to interject, a weak. Now, listen here, barely leaving his lips, before I cut him off. Mike, your time here is done. You chose to walk out of my life, and that's where you'll stay. Out. You're not welcome here, not in my business, not in my life. His eyes met mine, a flurry of emotions passing through them, anger, shame, maybe a hint of regret. But it was too late. I had moved on, built a new life from the ashes of his betrayal. The girl with him, her confidence now a crumbled facade, tugged at his arm. Let's go, Mike. This is pointless. They turned to leave, their exit as dramatic as their entrance, the door closing with a soft click behind them. The salon erupted into applause, a chorus of support and solidarity, Mrs. Jenkins leading the charge. She turned to me, her eyes softening. You, my dear, are the epitome of grace and strength. Don't you ever forget that. The room slowly returned to its rhythm, the incident fading into just another story to tell. I looked around, my heart swelling with pride. These walls, these people, were a part of my story, a narrative of resilience, of rebirth. After the door closed on that chapter of my life, the salon, my sanctuary, felt even more like a haven. Linda, ever the pillar of strength and wisdom, sidled up to me as I was tidying up for the day. Her smile was as warm as the sunshine peeking through the windows. "You did good today, real good," she said, her eyes twinkling with a mix of pride and mischief. I chuckled, shaking my head. "Good? I feel like I just went 10 rounds in the ring." "Ah, but you came out on top. That's what counts," she insisted, giving me a gentle nudge. "And speaking of coming out on top, I've been thinking." That tone, that look in her eye, I knew it well. It meant Linda had another one of her grand ideas, the kind that had turned this salon from a dream into an empire. I leaned on the counter, my curiosity piqued. "Out with it then. What's brewing in that brilliant mind of yours?" She leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Expansion is great, we've nailed that. But what about branching out even more? I'm talking product lines, training academies, maybe even a reality show. Sky's the limit." The idea was bold, daunting, and utterly thrilling. The thought of turning our brand into something even bigger, touching more lives, igniting more dreams, it set my heart racing. "Linda, that's huge," I stammered, the magnitude of her vision dawning on me. "You really think we can pull it off?" She scoffed, playfully swatting my arm. "Think? Zoya, I know we can. Haven't we proved that already? We're a dynamite team. With your brains and my charm, we're unstoppable." Her confidence was infectious. I felt it, that familiar flare of excitement, the spark that had ignited my journey from the ashes of my past life. "All right, Linda. Let's do it. Let's shake things up and see where we land." Her grin was all the answer I needed. We were in this together, ready to take on the world, one dream at a time. As the salon emptied and the lights dimmed, I took a moment to reflect. Life had thrown curveballs, heartache, and challenges my way. But it had also brought me friendships, triumphs, and a future bright with possibilities. I locked the door, the click echoing in the quiet street. The night was still, the stars overhead a silent chorus of witnesses to my resolve. Tomorrow was a new day, a new chapter. And I was ready for it, ready for the challenges, the adventures, the highs and lows. Ready to build, to dream, to soar.
My name's Carol, just a regular high school teacher with a love for old books and a quiet life. My world changed when I met David at the school fair. He was the main sponsor, the kind of guy who makes things happen without making a fuss about it. He had that quiet confidence and a smile that could light up the gloomiest day. It started with a thank you note I sent him for his generous contribution. He replied with invitation for coffee, saying it was the least he could do for the hard work we teachers were putting in. I remember walking into that coffee shop, my heart racing a bit, thinking, "Carol, it's just coffee, not a moon landing." David was easy to talk to. We chatted about everything, from books to the best pizza in town. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Before we knew it, coffee turned into dinner, and dinners turned into weekends together. A few months in, he wanted me to meet his mother, Mrs. Winters. "She's a bit old school, but she'll love you," he said. I was a bundle of nerves, wanting to make a good impression. I picked out my nicest dress and spent more time on my hair than I'd like to admit. The moment we walked into Mrs. Winters' living room, I felt her eyes on me like a hawk. "So, you're the teacher David won't stop talking about," she said, her voice colder than I expected. I smiled, reached out for a handshake, but she just nodded, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. Dinner was an experience. Mrs. Winters had this way of talking where every compliment sounded like she was doing you a favor. "That's an interesting dress, dear. Vintage shop?" she said, her eyebrow raised just so. I felt my cheeks burn, but I managed a small thank you. It's one of my favorites. David squeezed my hand under the table, a silent hang in there, but the digs kept coming. "A teacher, huh? Must be tough dealing with kids all day. Hope you don't bring that school discipline home," she chuckled, sipping her wine like it was the last one on earth. I tried, really tried, to keep the conversation light, but it was like dancing on thin ice. David changed the topic, talked about his work, the weather, anything to steer away from the silent judgments being passed across the table. Fast forward a few months, and there I was, in a white dress, saying Ido to the man who made it all worth it. The wedding was a blur of laughter, tears, and dancing. Mrs. Winters was there, of course, dressed to the nines and handing out opinions like candy. Lovely ceremony, though I'd have gone for real flowers. Not these. What are these, dear plastic? She said, eyeing the decorations. We moved into David's home soon after. It was a beautiful place, cozy and welcoming, except for the chill I felt whenever Mrs. Winters was around. David assured me it would get better, that she just needed time to get used to me. Moving into David's home felt like stepping into a new world, one where every corner held a memory of Mrs. Winters' reign. It wasn't long before I got introduced to her morning ritual, the infamous inspection. It started like clockwork every morning. The minute the clock struck 10, the front door would creak open, and in she'd walk like the queen of her castle. Mrs. Winters had this air about her, you know, like she owned every inch of the place. Her first move was always to slip on those pristine white gloves, snapping them tight like she was about to perform surgery. "Morning, Carol dear," she'd say, her voice dripping with a sweetness that never reached her eyes. "Just here to help you keep the place up to David's standards." I'd force a smile, my hands clenching the dish towel a bit too tight. "Thanks, Mrs. Winters, but I've got it covered." She'd tut and shake her head, already walking towards the living room. "Nonsense, dear. You're new to this. It takes a keen eye to keep a house like this." And then it'd begin. She'd glide from room to room, that white handkerchief in her hand sweeping over every surface. It was like watching some twisted ballet, her movements precise, calculated. "You see here, dear," she'd say, holding up the handkerchief, now with a faint smudge of dust. "This is what I'm talking about. Can't have David living in a dustbin, can we?" I bit my tongue, the words, "It's not a dustbin," sitting at the tip, but I swallowed them down. David had asked me to play nice, and I was trying, really trying. The worst was the kitchen. That's my territory, you know. I love cooking, always have. But she'd march in there like a general, inspecting the troops. "These pots aren't going to clean themselves, dear," she'd cluck, her fingers running over the rim of a saucepan I'd just washed. "It's clean, Mrs. Winters, I'd insist," my voice steady despite the storm inside. She'd hum, a sound that said, "I've heard better jokes." Well, we have different standards, I suppose. David's used to a certain way, you see. I'd nod, grinding my teeth so hard I was afraid I'd chip a tooth. It was the same every day. The living room, the bedrooms, even the bathrooms weren't spared. By the time she'd leave, I'd feel like a deflated balloon, all my energy sapped by her constant nitpicking. David would come home, all smiles and hugs, and I'd put on a brave face. "How was your day, love?" He'd ask, and I'd muster the brightest smile I could. "Oh, you know, the usual. Mrs. Winters stopped by to give some helpful tips," I'd say, the word helpful taking all my acting skills to sound even remotely sincere. He'd frown, that wrinkle appearing between his brows. "I'll talk to her, Carol. She means, well, she just has her way, you know." I knew. Oh, how I knew. But what I didn't know was how long I could play this game, smiling through the inspections, biting back the words that screamed inside me. Saturday mornings should have been about lazy breakfasts and staying in pajamas till noon. But in our house, they were about one thing, the dreaded family dinner. It wasn't just any dinner. It was the weekly performance, with Mrs. Winters as the stern judge and me. Well, I was the hopeful contestant, always falling short. I'd be up at the crack of dawn, the kitchen my battlefield. Pots and pans clanged, the oven roared, and spices danced in the air. It was my attempt, week after week, to impress the unimpressible, Mrs. Winters. David, bless his heart, would stumble in half awake. "Need any help, love?" He'd ask, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I'd shoo him away with a spoon covered in sauce. "Go get ready. Your mom will be here any minute, and you know how she is about punctuality." He'd chuckle, a sound that held a mix of love and a hint of worry. "Yeah, if you're on time, you're late, that's her motto." The clock hadn't even struck 6 when we'd hear the sharp rap on the door. Showtime. Mrs. Winters and Mr. Winters would step in, him with his warm smile, her with her eyes already scanning for faults. "Smells good in here, Carol. What's on the menu today?" Mr. Winters would always start off with a compliment, his genuine kindness a stark contrast to his wife. Before I could answer, Mrs. Winters would chime in, her voice slicing through the warmth. "I hope it's not that casserole from last time. Remember, David, how you had that stomachache?" David would wince, a silent plea in his eyes, begging me not to retort. "Mom, Carol's been working hard all day. Let's just enjoy the meal, yeah?" Dinner would be a tense affair. Mr. Winters would heap praises, his delicious "dear," and "you've outdone yourself, Carol," battling against Mrs. Winters's relentless critique. "This chicken is dry, dear. You really must learn to keep an eye on the oven," she'd say, pushing her barely touched plate away. I'd grit my teeth, forcing a polite, "I'll remember that for next time, Mrs. Winters." David would try to lighten the mood, his jokes a desperate attempt to bridge the widening gap at the table, but it was like throwing pebbles into a chasm, hoping for a bridge. And then, just when I thought I'd survived the worst, dessert would come, and with it, a fresh wave of critiques. "Is this pie supposed to be this? Crunchy?" Mrs. Winters would ask, the word crunchy sounding more like catastrophics. I'd swallow the lump in my throat, my reply a mix of wariness and defiance. "It's a family recipe, Mrs. Winters. It's always a hit." She'd raise an eyebrow, her gaze saying clearer than words, "Not in this family, dear." As they'd leave, Mr. Winters would give me a warm, encouraging hug, whispering, "Don't mind her, Carol. We all love your cooking." But Mrs. Winters's parting words would always be a reminder of the invisible scoreboard where I was always trilling. "Try harder next time, dear. A happy husband is a well-fed husband." The door would close behind them, and I'd stand there, a mix of frustration and defeat simmering inside. David would wrap his arms around me, his silence a mix of apology and solidarity. "It's just one night a week, love. We'll get through this," he'd whisper, his words a lifebuoy in the stormy seas of Saturday dinners. The news of the pregnancy should have been a moment of pure joy, a new chapter for David and me. But amidst the excitement, a shadow lingered, the thought of Mrs. Winters's reaction. David was over the moon, grinning ear to ear. "We're going to be parents. Carol, can you believe it?" he'd say, wrapping me in a hug so tight it felt like nothing could go wrong. But the first time Mrs. Winters dropped by after hearing the news, the air was thick with tension. I braced myself for her words, hoping maybe, just maybe, this new life might soften her. "Well, I do hope you've read up on parenting, Carol. It's not all cooing and cuddling, you know," she started, her tone as sharp as ever. I bit back a sigh, a fake smile plastered on. "We're thrilled, Mrs. Winters. And yes, we're reading a lot, getting ready for the baby." She sniffed, peering at me like she was assessing if I was up to the task. Well, make sure you follow the right books. Some of these modern ideas are just nonsense." David squeezed my hand under the table, a silent message of support. But as the weeks turned into months, the pressure didn't ease. Mrs. Winters's visits became a litany of advice and thinly veiled criticism. "You're not eating enough greens, Carol. You want the baby to be healthy, don't you?" she'd say, eyeing my plate like it was a crime scene. Or "Make sure you're not being too lazy. Exercise is important, but don't overdo it. You wouldn't want to harm the baby." It was a no-win situation. Do too little and I was careless. Do too much and I was reckless. The breaking point came one quiet afternoon. Mrs. Winters had just left. Her parting words, "Make sure the nursery is painted soon. You don't want the baby coming home to an unready house," ringing in my ears. David found me in the nursery, the paint samples scatter around, tears streaming down my face. "Carol, what's wrong? Talk to me, love," he said, his voice laced with worry. I let it all out, the frustration, the hurt, the exhaustion. "I can't do this anymore, David. It's like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home, your mother. It's just too much." David's face hardened, a rare sight. "I'll talk to her, Carol. This ends now. You and the baby are my priority." And he did. That evening, I heard hushed, tense voices from the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. David was setting boundaries, fighting for our little family. The next day, Mrs. Winters's visits stopped. No more morning inspections, no more veiled insults. It was a relief, yet the silence felt heavy, charged with unsaid words and unresolved tensions. David was quieter too, his smiles not reaching his eyes. "She's my mom, Carol. It hurts, but you and the baby come first." "Always?" I held him close, the future uncertain but our resolve clear. We were a team, and we'd face whatever came next, together. 7 years flew by since Lily, our little bundle of joy, came into our world. David was a doting father, his love for Lily shining in his every action. My father-in-law, a gentle soul, adored his granddaughter, his face lighting up with every giggle and every new word Lily spoke. But there was a chill that never thawed, a coldness that lingered in the air whenever Mrs. Winters was around. She kept her distance from Lily, her words as sharp as ever. "Children should be seen and not heard," she'd say, dismissing Lily's cheerful chatter as nothing more than noise. Lily, with her big heart and innocent eyes, couldn't understand why her grandma wasn't like the ones in her storybooks. She'd try, in her own sweet way, to win over Mrs. Winters. "Look, Grandma, I drew this for you," she'd say, holding up a crayon masterpiece. Mrs. Winters would barely glance at it, her voice devoid of warmth. "That's nice, dear. Now go play, Grandma's busy." But Lily never lost her spirit. She found her passion early, cooking. The kitchen was her kingdom, her small hands skillfully mixing, stirring, and baking. Every weekend was a new adventure, her culinary creations a source of pride for us. "Look, Daddy, I made cookies," she'd exclaim, her face beaming as she presented her latest work. David would scoop her up, his laughter filling the room. "Chef Lily, you have outdone yourself! These are delicious!" Even my father-in-law couldn't resist Lily's kitchen magic. "My little chef," he'd say, his eyes twinkling as he took a bite, "you'll be running your own restaurant in no time." Their words were a balm to Lily's soul, a stark contrast to the cold indifference she received from Mrs. Winters. But children have a resilience, a way of focusing on the love they receive, not the affection withheld. One evening, as Lily set the table, her latest culinary creation taking center stage, she looked up at me, her eyes serious. "Mom, why doesn't Grandma like my cooking? Doesn't she like food?" I knelt beside her, my heart aching with the innocence of her question. "Sweetheart, Grandma, she's just different. But your cooking is wonderful, and Daddy and Grandpa and we love it. That's what matters, right?" Lily nodded, her smile returning, the shadow of Mrs. Winters' indifference brushed aside by the love of those who mattered most. The Christmas invite from Mrs. Winters was a surprise, but Lily's excitement at the chance to showcase her cooking made us accept. Together, we baked gingerbread and apple pie, her little hands working diligently, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Grandma and everyone are gonna love these, right, Mom?" she'd ask, her confidence as warm as the oven. "Absolutely, sweetheart," I'd reassure her, though a part of me dreaded the unpredictable tides of Mrs. Winters' approval. Arriving at the bustling house, we placed our dishes on the grand Christmas table, an array of colors and smells that promised a feast. Lily's face was a picture of joy and anticipation as we mingled, catching up with relatives we hadn't seen in ages. But as we settled at the table, ready to share the meal and the joy of the season, Lily's excitement turned to confusion, then distress. "Mom, where's our gingerbread and pie?" she whispered, her small voice trembling. I scanned the table, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Our dishes were missing. Mrs. Winters at the head of the table was holding court, her laughter ringing out clear and sharp. I approached her, my voice firm but polite. "Mrs. Winters, the dishes Lily and I brought, where are they?" Her laughter cut through the festive hum, cold and piercing. "Oh, those." "I tossed them out, dear. We can't risk serving just anything to our guests, can we?" The room fell silent, the air heavy with shock and disbelief. Lily's eyes filled with tears, her dream of sharing her love through her cooking dashed in an instant. "But I made them for everyone. I worked so hard," she managed to say, her voice a fragile whisper against the weight of her grandmother's harsh words. Mrs. Winters shrugged, her eyes void of any warmth. "Well, dear, not everything made with love is fit for the table. Better safe than sorry." That was the last straw. David, who had always been the bridge between his mother and our family, stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor loudly. Mom, that's cruel. How could you? He said, his voice steady, but loaded with an anger I had rarely seen in him. Lily poured her heart into those dishes. She wanted to share something special, and you just threw it away like it was nothing. Mrs. Winters' smile faltered, her eyes widening in surprise. This was not the mild-mannered son she was used to. David, I was just... No, Mom, you went too far. Disrespecting Carol is one thing, but hurting Lily, your own granddaughter, that's something I can't and won't forgive. He interrupted, his disappointment and anger clear and unwavering. The room was still, the festive air replaced by a tense silence. Mrs. Winters sat there, the impact of David's words hitting her. She had expected compliance, maybe a few whispered complaints, but not this. Not her usually gentle son standing up to her, defending his family with such resolve. The air was thick with tension as we left Mrs. Winters' house, the festive lights mocking us with their cheer. The sound of Lily's quiet sobs was louder than the Christmas carols that played in the background. David's hand was firm on my shoulder, a silent pillar of strength. As we reached the door, Mrs. Winters' voice broke through the heavy silence, her tone desperate, a stark contrast to the cold disdain she'd shown earlier. Please don't go. I'm sorry, she stammered, her eyes wet with tears that seemed out of place on her stern face. David stopped, turning back to face his mother. The room held its breath. Sorry. Now you're sorry. His voice was low, but it cut through the room, sharp and clear. You humiliated your own granddaughter, Mom. You broke her heart. There's no sorry that can fix that. Mrs. Winters' sobs grew louder, her composure shattered, but it was too late. The damage was done, and the cracks too deep to mend. In the tense silence that followed, Mr. Winters stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. I can't sit here and pretend this is okay, Martha. Not this time. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his steps heavy with the burden of a decision long overdue. The room felt colder, the festive warmth snuffed out by a single act of unkindness. One by one, the guests stood up, their faces somber, their goodbyes muted and brief. The festive gathering was unraveling, the threads of family and friendship coming undone. As the last guest left, the door closing with a soft click, the magnitude of what had happened settled in the room. Mrs. Winters sat alone at the table, her sobs the only sound in the house that moments ago was filled with laughter and chatter. Outside, the cold air bit at our cheeks, a stark reminder of the warmth we'd left behind. David's arm was around Lily, her small body leaning into his for comfort. We walked in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on us. Back home, as we sat in the living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling softly, a sense of peace settled over us. It was a fragile peace, one born from the chaos of the night, but it was ours. Lily, nestled between us, her tears dried, but the hurt still fresh in her eyes, looked up and whispered, "Are we okay, Mom, Dad?" David hugged her closer, a silent vow in his embrace. "We're more than okay, sweetheart. We're together, and that's all that matters." And in that moment, as we held each other, the trials of the night receded, leaving behind a simple truth. Family wasn't just about shared blood or shared names. It was about shared love, shared pain, and the shared resolve to stand together when the world seemed to crumble around us. The fallout from that chaotic Christmas dinner rippled through our family like a shockwave. The house felt different, quieter, the air still tinged with the remnants of that night's revelations. David was somber, his usual cheer dimmed by the events that had unfolded. "I'm sorry, Carol," he said one evening as we sat in the living room, the only sound the ticking of the clock. "I should have stood up for you and Lily sooner. I let it go on for too long." I reached for his hand, feeling the roughness of his palm against mine. "You did what you thought was best, David. We both did. But now we know better. We move forward, together." He nodded, the lines on his face softening. But the true shock came the next day when Mr. Winters showed up at our doorstep, his eyes weary, a deep frown creasing his forehead. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David opened the door wider, concern etched on his face. "Of course, Dad. Is everything okay?" Mr. Winters took a seat, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas," he started, his voice trailing off. We waited, the tension thick in the air. Finally, he looked up, his eyes meeting ours. I can't believe Martha could be so cruel, so heartless to her own granddaughter. I never imagined she could go that far. David shifted in his seat, the weight of his father's words heavy on his shoulders. Dad, Mr. Winters raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. No, David, I should have seen it, should have done something sooner. But I didn't, and now I'm thinking about a divorce. The word hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Divorce wasn't a word thrown around lightly in our family, and coming from Mr. Winters, it was a bombshell. Divorce! David echoed, disbelief coloring his tone. Mr. Winters nodded, a resolute look on his face. I can't be with someone who shows such cruelty, not just to Carol and Lily, but to her own family. I've turned a blind eye for too long, hoping things would change. But after what happened at Christmas, I can't ignore it anymore. We sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts. The decision was monumental, not just for Mr. Winters, but for all of us. It was a line in the sand, a declaration that enough was enough. Whatever you decide, Dad, we're here for you, David said, his voice firm. You've always been there for us, and that won't change. Mr. Winters smiled, a weary, sad smile. Thank you, son. That means more than you know. In the days that followed, our family found a new rhythm, a new way of being. The shadows of the past lingered, but so did the promise of a fresh start, a chance to build something stronger and more resilient from the broken pieces. Lily's laughter returned, filling the house with a warmth that pushed back the darkness. And as we sat together, the three of us with Mr. Winters now a more frequent visitor, I realized that family wasn't about tolerating the intolerable. It was about standing up for each other, about choosing love and respect over blood and tradition. In the quiet moments, when the night wrapped the world in its embrace, I'd look at my little family and know that, despite the storms we'd weathered, we were stronger together. And no amount of cruelty or coldness could ever change that.
Managing a hotel wasn't just a job for me, it was my life. I'm Grace, and this hotel was my world until he walked in. He was impossible to miss, a young man in a suit that screamed money, his attention glued to an expensive phone. He checked in with a smile that could knock you off your feet. Good evening, I'm Ethan, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I'm here for a couple of nights. Anything interesting happening around here? I found myself smiling back, a bit caught off guard by his charm. Well, Ethan, the city's full of surprises. Depends on what you're looking for, I replied, handing him his key. Our chat was brief, but it sparked something. Maybe it was his curiosity, or the way he seemed genuinely interested when I spoke. He didn't stay long, but when he checked out, he left a note. Enjoyed our talk. Care to continue it over dinner? It read. I hesitated, not used to mixing work with my personal life. But something about him drew me in. We met at a local restaurant, a cozy place where the chatter and clinking glasses made it feel like a bubble away from the world. You really have this place dialed in, don't you, Grace? He said with a smile as we sat down. I laughed, feeling oddly at ease. Guess you could say I've had some practice. Dinner flew by as we talked about everything and nothing. He was an open book, or so it seemed, sharing tales of his travels and investments. When the conversation turned to me, I found myself opening up more than I usually would. I told him about losing my parents, about how it was just Mia and me against the world since I was 21. That's a heavy load to carry, Grace. You must be incredibly strong, he said, his eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and something else I couldn't quite place. I shrugged, brushing off the compliment. We all play the hand we're dealt, right? Mia's been my priority. Our parents left us a little something, and I've been careful with it. Made it grow, bit by bit. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's impressive. You've got a good head on your shoulders. As the night wore on, I realized I hadn't laughed this much in a long time. But when I tried to learn more about him, about his family, he'd skillfully change the subject. My folks and I don't see eye to eye. Let's just say they have their ideas about life, and I have mine, he said, a shadow crossing his face. I didn't press further. We all have our stories, our scars. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself not wanting it to end. There was something about Ethan, something that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. My life with Ethan felt like a whirlwind, each day a new adventure, every moment spent together filled with laughter and dreams of the future. He had this way of making the ordinary seem extraordinary, turning simple dinners into unforgettable evenings. Ethan, I still can't believe how fast everything is moving, I said to him one evening as we sat in our favorite little cafe, the one with the dim lights and cozy corners. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. Grace, when something feels right, why wait? I've never been sure of anything in my life, he replied, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I know, it's just, everything's happening so fast. It's a lot to take in, I confessed, feeling a whirlpool of emotion swirling inside me. He squeezed my hand gently. I get it, but trust me, Grace. I'm here for the long haul. I want to build a life with you, a future. And I want to start by making our wedding day the most memorable day of our lives. The way he spoke about our wedding, with such passion and certainty, it was hard not to get caught up in his vision. He painted a picture of a day so lavish and beautiful it took my breath away. Imagine it, Grace. A ceremony that no one will forget, a celebration of our love. It's going to be perfect, he said, his voice filled with excitement. And the honeymoon? You mentioned something about the most expensive hotel in the world? I asked, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in my voice. His smile widened. Yes, it's all part of the plan. But I need you to trust me, to take this leap with me. Your savings for the wedding, my funds for the honeymoon and our future home. Together, we'll make this a reality. I hesitated, the practical part of me screaming caution. But looking into his eyes, full of love and promise, I found myself nodding. Okay, Ethan. Let's do it. Let's make this wedding a day to remember. As the weeks flew by, the wedding preparations became all-consuming. Ethan was a man of action, taking care of every detail, ensuring that our day would be nothing short of spectacular. And as I watched him, so full of life and determination, I couldn't help but fall even deeper in love. Ethan, you're amazing. The way you're handling everything, I don't know how to thank you, I said to him one evening, as we reviewed the list of guests and the lavish menu he'd planned. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me. Grace, seeing you happy is all the thanks I need. This wedding, it's just the beginning. Our life together is going to be even more beautiful. But amidst the whirl of excitement, there were moments when doubt crept in, whispering questions in the quiet of the night. Was I moving too fast? Was I getting swept away by the romance of it all? Every time those thoughts surfaced, Ethan's assurances were there to chase them away. His words, his promises, they were my anchor, holding me steady in the storm of uncertainty. The wedding prep had my days packed, but amidst the whirl of cake tastings and flower selections, I knew I needed Mia, my sister, my confidant, by my side. Since our parents passed, it had been us against the world, and her input meant everything to me, especially now. I called her up, hoping she could sneak away from the cafe she worked at. Hey, Mia, think you can ditch the aprons and coffee smells for some tulle and satin today? I half joked, my voice laced with hopeful anticipation. Mia's laughter came through the phone, light and familiar. For you, sis, I'll trade coffee stains for bridal trains any day. Give me an hour to wrap things up here, and I'm all yours. The bridal shop was a wonderland of white and ivory, dresses cascading like waterfalls of lace and silk. As I tried on gowns, Mia's presence was a calming force in the storm of satin and sequins. That one, Grace. It's like it was made for you, Mia said, her eyes lighting up as I stepped out of the dressing room in a gown that felt just right. I studied my reflection, the dress hugging every curve and cascading to the floor in a sea of soft fabric. You think? I feel. I don't know, like a real bride, I admitted, a smile creeping onto my lips. Mia's grin matched mine, but in a fleeting moment, I caught a shadow pass over her face, quick and troubling. Before I could question it, she was up and pulling a dress off the rack. Mind if I give this one a whirl? Just for kicks, Mia said, holding up a stunning gown that caught the light with every movement. I laughed, the sound a mix of surprise and delight. Planning on eloping, are you? Or is there a mystery man you've been hiding from me? Mia's laugh, usually so carefree, held a note of something I couldn't quite place. Oh, Grace, you know me. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. But a girl can dream, can't she? She quipped, though her gaze darted away, hiding something. The day rolled on, a blend of laughter and whispers of silk. But Mia's mood seemed to flip like a switch, her usual bubbly demeanor clouded by moments of distraction. Everything okay, Mia? You seem a bit off today. I probed gently, concern threading through my words. She was quick to dismiss it, a wave of her hand erasing my worries. It's nothing, really. Just cafe chaos. You know how it gets, Mia assured me, but her forced smile didn't quite reach her eyes. As we left the bridal shop, the weight of her secrets seemed to hang between us, an unspoken tension that neither of us could quite navigate. I wanted to believe it was just pre-wedding stress, maybe a spat with a troublesome customer, but the nagging in my gut told me it was something more. That night, as I lay in bed, the excitement of finding the perfect dress was overshadowed by the puzzle that was Mia's behavior. She was the one person who had always been an open book to me, yet now, there were pages I couldn't read, words hidden just out of sight. And as the wedding day edged closer, the joy I should have been feeling was tinged with a worry I couldn't shake. Mia and I had faced everything together, but now, it felt like there was a growing gap, one filled with secrets and unasked questions. Little did I know, the answers to those questions were about to turn my world on its head. It was a day like any other, or so I thought, until Ethan left his phone buzzing and forgotten on the kitchen counter. As I went about tidying up the apartment, the constant notifications from his phone nagged at me, a persistent reminder of something amiss. The lack of a password was a surprise, but it was nothing compared to the shock that awaited me inside. The messages between Ethan and Mia were like a punch to the gut, each word a betrayal that tore through my heart. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to push me aside like I was nothing, like all the years of sisterhood with Mia meant less than the dirt under their shoes. I read and reread Mia's message, confessing her pregnancy with Ethan's child. The words blurred as tears clouded my vision. Can't believe we pulled this off. She's such a fool, falling for every lie. And now, with the baby, we can finally be together, just as we planned, it read. The world around me seemed to spin, a carousel of deceit and treachery. Ethan's reply was no better, declaring his love for Mia and his eagerness to see me humiliated, ousted from my own wedding. She's just a naive cash cow. Can't wait to get rid of her and start our real life together. This wedding will be perfect, thanks to her money, he wrote. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, a storm of emotions raging within me. Betrayal, anger, disbelief, they all fought for dominance, but above all, a cold determination began to take root. They thought they could use me, discard me like an old toy? I'd show them the price of underestimating Grace Anderson. When Ethan returned, his carefree demeanor was like a slap in the face. Hey, babe, did I miss any important calls? He asked, casually picking up his phone. I forced a smile, my insides churning with anger. Nope, just the usual stuff. Busy day? I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil within. He flashed that charming smile, the one I now knew was nothing but a mask. As always. But nothing's more important than coming back to you, he said, leaning in for a kiss I had to force myself not to recoil from. From that moment on, I played the part of the oblivious fiancé to perfection. I smiled, I nodded, I went along with the wedding plans. But behind the scenes, I was planning my revenge on the two people who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Each passing day was a test of my will, a balancing act between the role I had to play and the fury that burned within. But I wouldn't let them see me break. I'd bide my time, and when the moment was right, they'd learn the true cost of their treachery. And as I lay in bed each night, the image of Ethan and Mia's deceitful faces etched into my mind, I made a silent vow. They would pay for what they'd done, and their twisted game would be their undoing. I was no longer just the jilted fiancé, I was the architect of their downfall, and my revenge would be meticulous, calculated, and oh so sweet. The days leading up to the wedding felt surreal. On the surface, everything was perfect, the flowers, the guest list, the dress. But beneath the facade of perfection was a storm brewing, a tempest of anger and betrayal that I held tightly within. Ethan was his usual self, all smiles and affection, blissfully unaware of the storm he was about to sail into. "Grace, everything's coming together so beautifully. This wedding is going to be the talk of the town," he said one evening, as we reviewed the final preparations. I nodded, my smile practiced and polished. "Yes, it's going to be a day to remember," I replied, the words laced with a meaning he couldn't possibly grasp. Mia was harder to face. The sister I had loved and protected was now a stranger, her every word and gesture a reminder of her betrayal. Yet, I kept my mask firmly in place, the mask of the loving sister, blissfully ignorant of the knife she had planted in my back. "Grace, you're handling everything so well. I don't know how you do it," Mia said one day, as we finalized the seating arrangements. I looked at her, the sister I thought I knew, and forced a laugh. "Oh, Mia, you know me. Always had a knack for organizing chaos," I said, the irony of the statement not lost on me. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension became almost tangible, a tightrope I walked with precision and care. Ethan's phone was now always guarded, his conversations hushed and hurried. But it didn't matter. I had seen enough, knew enough. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a beautiful day for a beautiful disaster. As I got ready, the reflection in the mirror showed a bride, serene and poised. But behind the veil and the makeup was a woman on a mission, a woman who would no longer be a pawn in someone else's game. "Mia's running late, huh?" Ethan remarked casually, adjusting his tie. I met his gaze in the mirror, my eyes giving nothing away. "Yes, but she'll be here. Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, the double meaning clear in my voice. He nodded, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Well, she's always been a bit unpredictable. But today's about us, Grace. Our new beginning." I turned to face him, my smile a masterpiece of composure. "Yes, Ethan. A new beginning indeed," I said, my heart steeling itself for what was about to come. And as I walked down the aisle, the eyes of friends and family on me, I knew that this was it. The calm before the storm was over, and the reckoning was about to begin. The vows were waiting, the guests were watching, and the stage was set. It was time for the truth to come crashing down, and for the real show to begin. Standing next to Ethan in front of the priest, my heart was a mix of hope and trepidation. The words of the vows hovered in the air, a promise of forever that was about to be shattered in the most brutal way. The guests, unaware of the storm about to break, watched us with smiles and teary eyes. But then, the unimaginable happened. Mia, dressed in a bridal gown that mirrored my own, stormed down the aisle. Her eyes locked on mine, not with sisterly love, but with a cold determination that chilled me to the bone. "Move aside, Grace. I'm the one who deserves to be here. Ethan loves me, and this child I'm carrying is his," Mia declared, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. The room erupted into whispers and gasps, the guests turning to each other in confusion and disbelief. Ethan, rather than showing any sign of shock or remorse, let out a hearty laugh, his true colors shining through the polished facade. "Well said, Mia. Grace, you've been a good host, but this is where your part ends. Why don't you join the audience? This is Mia's moment now," Ethan jeered, his words dripping with mockery and contempt. The audacity of their betrayal, so public and so cruel, sent a shockwave through the crowd. But as the reality of the situation sank in, my reaction surprised everyone, including myself. I looked at Ethan, then at Mia, and smiled. Of course, why not? I wouldn't want to miss the show. After all, I did pay for it, I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Mia and Ethan exchanged a confused glance, clearly not expecting such a composed response. The guests, too, were baffled, their eyes darting between us, trying to make sense of the surreal scene unfolding before them. As I gracefully took a seat among the guests, my head held high, the whispers grew louder. What's she up to? Is she really going to let this happen? The questions buzzed around the room like a swarm of bees, but I remained serene, a statue amidst the chaos. Ethan and Mia, now standing together at the altar, looked unnerved. My calm demeanor had thrown them off, their plan to humiliate and discard me not unfolding as they had anticipated. What's your game, Grace? Why are you so calm? Ethan asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and concern. I met his gaze, my smile never wavering. No game, Ethan. Just enjoying the fruits of my labor. Please, proceed. I'm eager to see how this plays out, I replied, my words a velvet-covered dagger. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The guests watched in a mix of shock and anticipation, unsure whether they were witnessing a wedding or the prelude to a dramatic reckoning. As Mia and Ethan exchanged vows, the words felt hollow, a mockery of the sacred promise they were supposed to represent. And as I sat there, surrounded by friends and family who were struggling to comprehend the spectacle, I knew that this was just the beginning. The real show was yet to come, and Mia and Ethan, in their arrogance and deceit, had just secured front-row seats to their own downfall. As the priest asked if anyone objected, the doors burst open. A woman, older and more worn than either Ethan, stormed in, her eyes blazing with fury. Stop this wedding right now, she demanded, her voice slicing through the silence like a knife. Ethan's face turned ashen, his eyes wide with shock. Catherine? What are you doing here? He stammered, the mask of the perfect groom slipping away. Catherine, Ethan's legal wife, as I had discovered, marched up to the altar. I'm here to stop you from making a bigger fool of yourself and these people. Grace, you deserve to know the truth, she said, turning to me with a sympathetic look. The guests murmured among themselves, the scandal unfolding before them more gripping than any soap opera. Mia clutched her stomach, her face a mask of shock and fear. Catherine continued, her voice firm and clear. Ethan is a liar and a cheat. He's in debt up to his ears, his investments failed, and he's been using you all to dig himself out of his hole. And Mia, you poor girl, you're just another pawn in his game. The room erupted into chaos, the guests rising from their seats, the whispers growing louder. Ethan tried to speak, but his words were drowned out by the uproar. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. There's more, I announced, silencing the room. I hired a private detective after I discovered Ethan and Mia's affair. Not only is Ethan already married and drowning in debt, but he's also been hiding a daughter, a child he's never supported. Mia's face crumpled, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. Ethan, is this true? Tell me she's lying, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Ethan, now pale and defeated, had no words. His lies, his deceit, all laid bare for the world to see. But the final blow was yet to come. As the guests processed the revelations, Ethan's parents, two stern and imposing figures, entered the room. I had reached out to them, told them everything. And now, they were here to confront the son who had brought shame to their name. Ethan's father, a man of few words, spoke with a voice that resonated with disappointment and anger. Ethan, you are no son of mine. Your actions today and in the past have shown your true character. You are cut off from our family and our fortune. As the room settled into an uneasy silence, I looked at Ethan, Mia, and the shattered dreams they had tried to build on a foundation of deceit. The pain of betrayal still throbbed in my heart, but standing there, amidst the ruins of what was meant to be my happiest day, I knew that this was not the end of my story. In the aftermath, I found myself in the cold halls of justice, seeking reparation for the damage Ethan had caused. The courtroom felt like another world, a place where the pain and humiliation I had endured were translated into legal jargon and paperwork. "Ethan, you've not only broken a promise, but you've also shattered trust and exploited generosity. You owe me more than just an apology. You owe me compensation for turning my life upside down," I stated firmly, my voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. The judge's gavel sounded like thunder in the tense silence. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is hereby ordered to pay $50,000 in damages for the distress and financial loss caused," he declared, his words a balm to my wounded spirit. As I walked out of the courtroom, the burden of the past months felt lighter. Justice had been served, but the road to healing was just beginning. Ethan's troubles didn't end with me. Catherine, his legal wife, fueled by hurt and fury, launched her own legal battle, demanding compensation for his infidelity and neglect of their child. The once suave and confident man was now entangled in a web of his own making, his lies and deceit finally catching up to him. Mia, my sister, the person I had trusted and loved more than anyone, found herself alone and abandoned. Ethan had fled the city, leaving her to face the consequences of their actions. She was pregnant and scared, a far cry from the carefree and happy girl she once was. "Grace, I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness. But I'm lost, and I don't know what to do," Mia pleaded one day, her eyes filled with tears. I looked at her, the sister I once would have done anything for. "Mia, you were my family, my blood. But what you did, it's not something I can just forget or forgive. You chose your path, and now you have to walk it, just like I'm walking mine." The distance between us was more than just physical. It was a chasm filled with betrayal and hurt, too wide and too deep to ever bridge again. Life moved on, but the scars of those tumultuous months remained. I focused on rebuilding my life, on finding peace in the simple things. I had loved and lost, trusted and been betrayed, but through it all, I had survived. And as I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized that the most important journey was the one I was taking within myself. A journey of healing, of rediscovering my strength, and of learning to trust and love again.